On this episode of Militaria at the Museum, we trace the journey of cavalry sabers, from their once deadly edge on the battlefield to their eventual disappearance in the age of modern warfare. Next, we delve into the papers and journal of Admiral Sir Peter Halkett. Finally, we highlight the CF-100 and Bell 47 J2A Ranger. Beyond museum exhibits lies a hidden realm of archived artifacts that hold the keys to unlocking intriguing stories from the past. Come along as I meet with experts at the Army, Naval, and Aviation museums, where I've been granted special access to pull back the curtains and reveal the secrets of their militaria. My name is Sandy Hiltz, and all my life I've been captivated by military history. Now, I have the rare opportunity to explore a collection of fascinating military artifacts on Militaria at the Museum. At the Army Museum, I'm exploring the evolution of cavalry sabers with expert Julie Thomas, tracing their journey from cutting-edge weapons to museum artifacts. Once the epitome of military innovation, these sabers symbolize the prowess and discipline of mounted soldiers. We'll delve into how these blades transition from battlefield essentials to ceremonial kit. Julie, I've heard a lot of different terms used to describe these various edged weapons, particularly sword and saber.
So these are all swords. Saber refers specifically to the type of blade that's on the sword, and a saber blade is that nice, beautiful curved blade.
Ah, excellent. And I understand you have some examples for me to look at.
I sure do. Shall we go?
Excellent. This is really quite a selection, really excited to get into these, but start off by telling me sort of what period of time we're covering.
We are covering right from 1796 all the way up to modern day.
And these are, of course, cavalry swords. Tell me, what is it that makes these a cavalry sword, and what would have made these good for battle while on horseback?
Cavalry are the members of the Army that ride on horseback. There's two types of cavalry. There's the light cavalry and the heavy cavalry in the British Army. And the light cavalry are really meant for speed, whereas heavy cavalry are meant to break through the front lines. Cavalry swords are usually specifically designed for their style of fighting. Light cavalry have, at this point in time, a lot of sabers, so the blades are curved, they're light and easy to use, and the heavy cavalry have very long blades, and they go through some different evolutions depending on the style of fighting that they're using.
I assume that the fact that you are on horseback means your blade would be considerably longer than that of an infantry soldier, is that right?
They are a few inches longer in the heavy cavalry. The light cavalry are oftentimes shorter. So not than the infantry, but shorter than the heavy cavalry. Here we have our 1796 pattern light cavalry saber here. In 1796, John Gaspard Le Marchand was looking at the Hungarian hussars and was noticing how well their cavalry worked. As we get the sabers that are really curved, John Gaspard Le Marchand designs a whole series of training to train the troopers on how to use the swords. Or as the blades get a little bit straighter, a little less curved, a whole new system of training is also developed to go along with the new style of sword. Officers had always, and even today, have to purchase their own sword. They're not issued to them through the Army.
Two of these heavy cavalry swords, are they the same, Julie?
So they're not. So here we have the 1796 heavy cavalry saber, and you can see the differences here. Start with the hilt. While it's still got the D-shaped hilt, the guard is much larger. So as I have the sword out, it's much harder for an opponent to get at my hand. This one is very straight, much less of a curve than the light cavalry. And it goes to this lovely hatchet point because Marchand thought that heavy cavalry would need to fight the same way with the cutting and slashing. So made this really blunt point at the end. This was standardized across all cavalry. So all light cavalry had that sword, and all heavy cavalry had this one.
So we have the 1796 pattern, and then we move to the 1821. What is the reason behind that?
Right, so as we get to the 1821, we're really dealing in a relative time of peace. It's a beautiful light design. As I say that, during this period, the decision was made that light and heavy cavalry would carry the same design. Spear point tip on it, it's quite sharp, and a very strong pipe back on the blade, quite light, just under a couple pounds, but still designed the same way. Even though we've moved on from the Napoleonic Wars and now we're into the Crimean Wars, we're still sort of using the same type of techniques for fighting both light and heavy cavalry. And then in 1885, a couple more small updates, and one of them is this little piece of metal you can see at the top of the guard. And that is to help protect the hand as I'm holding it. And this is the same blade that we've been going through the whole 1864 pattern, but you can see they've made the bull guard much larger. But they've made some interesting changes to the grip, and it's quite a bit longer. The blade's a bit shorter, same design, but the thought is that I can hold the grip further down with my thumb on top, sort of like you would be holding a knife when you're cutting, so that I can have a different style of grip, and that increases my reach with the blade.
And when we talk about things such as the Boer War, would the earlier swords have still been used in those wars, or when they sort of roll one of these out, do they take all the other swords out of service and completely replace them?
That's a great question. Nothing in the army is instantaneous. So often you'll see a lot of overlap, especially at the beginning of which patterns they're using. So it takes time for when the pattern is approved, to when it goes then to the makers, to then when it can actually be put in a trooper's hands.
And then we move into something that's starting to look a bit more modern.
We look here at the 1908 pattern, and it's changed quite a bit. And what's changed is that they've decided that the cutting and slashing style of fighting isn't working. So when commanders are on the field of battle, they're noticing that other cavalries and other armies are having a lot more success when they're running people through, when they're able to thrust, because it's taking the opponent out. So if I just cut you, you definitely have the opportunity to come back at me, right? So they change up the style of fighting. They change the blade completely. This is for both light and heavy cavalry. So it's actually quite heavy, quite sturdy, and most of that is in the blade. This really thick bar blade. You can see the back is very thick, very sturdy. The blade doesn't want to flex. It's got just a thin fuller, which is adding to the weight. So the changes in evolution of the cavalry swords really show an adaptation of warfare and melee fighting as they move through time, and as firearms also evolve through time, their skills become even higher, are no longer wearing heavy suits of armor, but as we move into the First World War, we see the cavalry being used very strategically. So here we have the 1912 officer's dress sword officers carry today. It's much, much lighter than the 1908. I'm only using it for ceremonial purposes. It doesn't need to be as sturdy.
Julie, thank you so much for taking these out and showing them to me today. It's been a pleasure to look through what is over 100 years of evolution in not only the design, but also the thinking behind these sabers.
It was my pleasure. If you wanted to learn more, the French have their own series of sabers and different ways of fighting. So there's definitely a lot more that we can learn and look at.
I'm looking forward to it. Coming up next, we'll explore the writings of Sir Peter Halkett, a British admiral whose papers offer a rare glimpse into naval strategy and life during his time in Halifax. Over at the Navy Museum, I'm examining the papers and journals of Admiral Sir Peter Halkett, guided by expert Lisa McNiven. These documents provide a fascinating portrait of naval life in the 19th century. We'll uncover lessons in leadership and the strong historical ties between Nova Scotia and Bermuda. I understand you have a wonderful glimpse into the life of one of the admirals who actually resided here at Admiralty House.
We do. We have a beautiful document. Actually, they're his charter orders from 1836 to 1837 of Sir Peter Halkett.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Would you like to go into the library and take a better look at it?
I'd love to.
Okay, let's go.
Lisa, this seems like a good time to not judge a book by its cover, for if one did that, they might think this was of quite little consequence. But tell me, how did this make its way to the museum?
Well, that in itself might be a mystery. I have no documentation on who donated this document. So there are other documents in this house that may have simply been found in collection. Considering that Sir Peter Halkett was here for a year in 1836, there is always that slight chance that this has always been in this house. Sir Peter Halkett was the 6th Baronet of Fife. He joined the British Royal Navy when he was a young man, joined as a lieutenant, and he rose through the ranks and eventually participated in the War of 1812 and continued his service until he was appointed Admiral of the North Atlantic and West Indies.
And then how did he make his way to Halifax?
Between the story to Halifax is the War of 1812. He was here in Halifax as the Admiral of the North Atlantic and the West Indian Station from 1836 to 1837.
He was also involved in the Napoleonic Wars, was he not?
He was. He had a long-standing career.
That really is sort of the golden age of the Royal Navy.
Absolutely. And this is a beautiful document talking about a year in the life of Sir Peter Halkett. In reading his journals, I have a sense that the administration and the day-to-day rules of governing a ship and the countries that he is docking at were very strenuous, but he always rose above and he always made sure that these rules were enforced for everyone's safety and for their good. There's actually an entry in here that refers to Bermuda in 1836. Sir Peter Halkett was mainly stationed on the east coast between Bermuda, Barbados, and Jamaica. He is creating this path of transport. He is keeping an eye on enforcing the anti-slave trade laws at the time. And he's also continuing his rapport with England and enforcing the orders that they are giving him. Something that had never dawned on me, that as beautiful as the country would be, the conditions at the time would have been quite harrowing. He's advising ships within the dock in the vicinity to procure water and use the utmost frugality at all costs because there simply isn't enough fresh water.
Oh, that's fascinating. And this is, of course, a time in which Bermuda would have been a very important destination.
Absolutely. And it struck me as odd as I was reading that, going, that's one of the conditions as idealistic. There's also the other side to it also. In reading Sir Peter Halkett's journal, I have a sense that he was above the board and to the rules. There was a message transpired during his year, 1836, that he may be required to transport convicts to another island, and he wanted nothing to do with that. This was not his realm of safety, and he didn't feel secure in having a job that could go sideways quite quickly.
During your research into this document, have there been any passages in particular that have stood out to you?
Walking and reading the document has been absolutely fascinating, but one aspect, actually two, stick out in my mind. December 1836, Sir Peter Halkett is referring to the dire water conditions within Bermuda and the emphasis to conserve water. There's simply not enough to go around, the precarious situation that they find themselves in. And January of 37, he's referring to a ship coming from Sierra Leone, I understand, and Sir Peter Halkett is serving this ship papers according to the Treaty of Spain, stopping their transport of slave cargo.
Now that's very interesting to see that written there. And of course, the Royal Navy spent a very, very long period of its history fighting slavery, and that's something that it really does not get enough credit for.
Absolutely. In my mind, and when I've read through his correspondence, he was very reliable. The orders that he's been given through packets from England to his ship, the Melville, he adheres to them. There is no debate. If you are giving him an order, he is going to follow through with it.
What other sorts of information do we find contained within this book?
It's an interesting glimpse into stores, actually. He refers to furniture for ships, at least on the eastern seafront for the British Navy. They're actually acquiring their stores from Jamaica. He's directing queries of where to get furniture and victualling. They're actually, at this time, getting it from Jamaica.
That's very interesting. And I think even the doors in this house, Admiralty House here in Halifax, they're from one of those islands, are they?
Absolutely. The main doors in the staircase have been referenced as Jamaican mahogany.
What is the historical value of this document?
I enjoy this document for the year in the life of Sir Peter Halkett. What he is enforcing, he's following commands, he's very dutiful and litigious. When I went to do more research on him, I noticed that the family records, the Baronet of Fife, are held in the Scottish Archives, but they do not list this as an artifact or as a source for information. So I'm wondering if we're the only ones that have this record of Sir Peter Halkett's life for this year.
Oh, that's fascinating to think that this may be the only recording of that year of his life.
Absolutely. And unfortunately, within about a year, around 1838, he dies.
Lisa, thank you so much for pulling this out of the archive for me to look at today. It's a wonderful record of that period and events facing the Royal Navy at the time, but also the life of a very dutiful servant of king and country.
Absolutely. He is definitely worth more research, and I'll enjoy going in and finding more about him.
Oh, and I'd love to hear any updates that come along. After the break, I'll learn about the history of two iconic aircrafts, the Bell 47J and the CF-100. At the Aviation Museum, I'm taking a close look at the Bell 47J helicopter with museum expert Mark People. Known for its exceptional maneuverability, this helicopter played a crucial role in rescue operations and military missions during the 1950s and 60s. Mark, what exactly are we doing in this helicopter?
Well, we are sitting in this Bell J47J, and it relates to another exhibit that we have on display here at the museum, the CF-100 Canuck. So the confluence of the history and also of these artifacts is very much tied. But here we are 60 years later, and they're literally sitting together.
I'd love to go see that.
Well, let's go check it out.
Mark, tell me a bit more about the Canuck.
So this is an Avro Canada CF-100, also known as the Canuck. And it was Canada's only designed and built all-weather fighter aircraft, built by Avro Aircraft in Malton, Toronto, in the early 50s. So it's an amazing Canadian contribution. But it's also a Mark V. This particular one is a Mark V version. And our example here was used operationally by the RCF in training squadrons in Bagotville, Quebec. And it came to our museum, and we've polished up the metal, and we've tied it up, and recently put the markings on the side of it. So here it sits.
Of course, the other half of this story is the Bell helicopter. What can you tell me about that?
The Bell J47 was an effective helicopter because it could be adapted fairly easily to lift different cargoes, and also some applications use it for military evacuation. In that case, they would tend to put pods or carry the stretcher cases on the outriggers of the aircraft outside it.
So what's the story that links these two aircraft?
These two aircraft are linked for an interesting story that happened in 1962, where the CF-100 was up on a training mission, and it was flying at 15,000 feet, and they basically pushed the stick forward, and all of a sudden they banked, and then all of a sudden the ejector seats that they were both sitting on were thrown up towards the canopy. The canopy released, popped off. One of the seats blew its parachute out, and the backseat operator rode in, was pulled out, and ended up being thrown from the aircraft, and Norm landed in the forest of Quebec.
That must have come as an incredible surprise to him.
Well, I think it was incredible to them all. Ironically, the Bell J-47 that we have just a few meters away from us was flying that day. I think it was checking out power lines, and they spotted Norm in the woods. And actually, they landed, picked him up, and brought him back to Bagotville.
Oh, that's incredible. So they hadn't even gotten a call or anything about it. They just happened to see him there in the wood.
Luckily, I guess with the ejector seat being forced out, sometimes you would have an issue with your back. Because again, it's at that point, the early ejector seats weren't that great, and there was an issue about hurting yourself doing it. But this case, he just literally fell out of the aircraft, so there wasn't that. So he just had a nice parachute ride down, and off he went. But to be sort of connected, so now we sit 60 years plus later, same aircraft is with that same helicopter. I mean, the backstory obviously is the fact that, the ground technicians who worked on the ejector seats had failed to do their job. So obviously there was a fairly extensive safety report run on that. But luckily the pilot, Dave Saunders, was able to bring the 100 back home, and ultimately, they got to fly another day.
So the plane has rolled, which is, I would think, a fairly common thing for a plane like this to do. How is it that seat makes its way through the canopy and down towards the forest floor?
As you can imagine, the seats should have been secured properly, and that was where the ground crew were at fault, and that's probably where the safety report, I haven't read the safety report on the incident, but they literally should have been attached. So you can imagine that you're flying, you turn, and all of a sudden your seat starts moving up its rails because they're on rails. And it would have put pressure on the canopy, it would have popped the canopy off. And obviously from pictures we see of the aircraft landing, it doesn't have the canopy on it, the canopy's gone. But in the process, the back seat was ejected. Dave Saunders, the pilot, had the sense that he grabbed onto the control column, which is right in front of the aircraft, and with two hands, held on for dear life, as now the canopy's departed, his back seat's departed, and he's trying to wrestle the aircraft so he can bring it down and move it so that the seat will come back down. So eventually he achieved that, but now he's flying with no canopy, so he's got all the wind, the noise, and no back seater. So you can imagine that after that, in addition, he's also got one of the drogue parachutes is attached to his rudder, their plane, because when it came off, it attached to it as well too. So he's got all these issues there, but he was successful in landing back at Bagotville with the aircraft, but minus his back seater. And then that's obviously the question is, where is the back seater?
And how far away was he from where he was going to eventually land?
I'm not exactly sure. I would probably say it was just they were fairly close, if not, maybe 100 miles less than that.
Right.
The incident provides us with a great example of where someone's day goes very wrong very quickly. But the ability and the training that the RCF pilot had certainly provided him with some of the tools enabled to save the day and to save himself, in addition to bringing the aircraft home, which after suddenly noticing that you're being thrown out of the aircraft and only having the wits about you to grab the control stick to keep you in the aircraft probably shows at least there was a certain amount of skill and daring at this particular point to enable that.
Is this something that was known to happen, Mark? Were there other instances of the ejector seats sort of just falling out of the planes?
I don't know of any other specific ones, but obviously with the rise of technology, we're now dealing with all-weather aircraft. We're dealing with different sort of new technologies. Ejector seats were, relatively new at that point. So I think it is, I think there could be other examples, but in this case, this is the one that shines through. So,
Mark, thank you for sharing with me this really incredible story.
Well, it is an interesting story in a sense that it's rare that sort of catastrophe can happen and the aircraft survive, but also then to have the two aircraft that were actually involved in that incident be sitting meters apart on the museum floor here.
Having special access to go beyond museum exhibits reveals some of history's best kept secrets and most interesting stories. Thank you for joining me in this exploration of military artifacts on another episode of Militaria at the museum.